The time known as the Seasons of Uncertainty came to an end following the coronation of Tirneach mac Anguish as Reig. The time of relative peace that followed became known as the Season of Renewal, at least among certain historians. A key reason for this peace was the rapid regrouping and mobilisation by the Reig of the faithful Gologlig bands, who had been scattered across the 5 realms of Tirneach during the Seasons of Uncertainty. The Reig sent these bands to address the problems that had been left to fester during the years of uncertainty. Among the missions which were entrusted to the Gologlig, Cuach na Reig, newly reformed under torchbearer Ulgar Corcra, were directed to Vigil. They were tasked with assisting Altna ní Orfacha, Iarla of Vigil, with a problem that beset the Grey Lands, a region on the border of Vigil and Uasa. While Vigil as a whole was still reeling from the Gwicht attacks upon Umra and Bar, a terrible Gwicht creature called the Hethawicht stalked the Grey Lands. It used its fell powers to transform normally placid beasts into monstrous creatures and unleash them upon the beleaguered people of the Grey Lands. Cuach na Reig was tasked with tracking down the foul beast and putting an end to it. Or at least, that was the primary and public reason for the band's presence. The Iarla also requested the aid of the band on a more politically sensitive matter. In the past number of months, they had become aware of a growing number of armed groups wandering through the Grey Lands, from one riding to the next, taking measures to hide their purpose and intention, and, in some cases, bearing the mark of golden knives that purported to be Gologlig. They feared that it could be an attempt by some of the riders of the region to avoid the limits that the Iarla had imposed on the number of militia they could maintain, and, perhaps, that this was being done for some nefarious purpose. The Iarla requested that Cuach na Reig discreetly investigate the riders of the region, inviting them to meetings to assess whether they held traitorous intent or otherwise investigate their activities. There are 10 ridings within the Greylands, and the Iarla provided some insight into the riders of the region to assist Cuach na Reig in their task. Lias Olach. Lias Olach is located by the shores of Loch Dowan and the fiefdom of the mercurial Lysir rider, Aegon the Blue. Aegon is one of the richest men in the 5 realms, his wealth earned during his time sailing with far-touched merchants of the Prosperidad. He had been a valued advisor to the Iarla, but in recent years was very public about proclaiming his interest in retiring, or perhaps even taking the path of many candles. In light of this, the Iarla did not feel him a likely suspect. Gaelaspa. Gaelaspa is located near the capital of Bar and benefits from trade up and down the main road to Uasa. Gaelaspa is the fiefdom of the Creia rider Dosach och Éannan. It is also famous as the site of one of the 100 heroes' many impossible stands against the Gwicht, where all seemed hopeless except for the arrival of Éannan the Implacable, foster brother of Finian the Brave, who routed the Gwicht and helped his companions to go on to fight another day. Bachanach. Bachanach has the dubious honour of being the site of the most frequent Gwicht attacks in Vigil. Even so, in comparison to ridings in other realms, it is relatively peaceful and positioned close enough to the main road that the rider's vassals make a decent living. The human rider of Bachanach, Rose I Duvgila, is in a tenuous political position and likely to lose her standing as a member of the Crimson Court. Her position made all the more tenuous due to the strains of the Seasons of Uncertainty. The riding was granted to the current rider's grandmother, Maureen I Duvgila, for their heroism in the defence of the Iarla, granting the family the riding for 2 generations. Flan's Rest. Flan's Rest is one of the most valuable and prosperous ridings in Vigil, and thus the realms. Although it is the smallest riding in the region, the town of Flan's Rest is a prosperous and vital market for all trade between Vigil and Uasa. It is generally granted to a rider who has proved themselves to be a capable ruler in some other respect, and often the Iarla is awarded to their closest advisors. Ethna the Mender, the Creia rider of the region, is a famed artisan, and the Iarla considered her a valuable ally as she provided scrupulous reports on all comings and goings through Flan's Rest. The past few seasons, however, those reports had stopped, drawing some suspicion on the rider. Further, rumours spread that in recent times, visitors to Flan's Rest have reported a rougher element has emerged, and it is proving bad for business. Táil Tarmh. Táil Tarmh has been held by the Carmine branch of the O'Conlaigh family for 2 generations, as reward to Cor O'Conlaigh for saving the life of the Iarla in the year 765. It has rich pastures, ideal for cattle grazing, which gives the riding its name. The current rider, Malkeen O'Conlaigh, is much given to hunting, and has been said to have brought all kinds of dangerous beasts to stock his grounds. Malkeen has no notable achievements, and has been very vocal about his issues with the Iarla. Reimshin. Reimshin has traditionally been the major fortress in the Greylands, acting as a bulwark to attacks against the Gwicht, and also to any privations from the Uisig across the border. In recent years, under the ill-fated rule of Turloch Bon O'Carria, the fortress and the riding itself had fallen into disrepair. The Crea rider of Reimshin, Urunta Nick Achgawa, not only comes from a prestigious family that can trace its roots all the way back to Mihal the Reforger, but is herself a gifted architect with a talent for running her riding. They have pledged to the Iarla to put the riding to rights. The only apparent mark against her and her family is the long-running feud between her and the Och'Enan clan of Gillespie. A rivalry apparently ended with the betrothal of their heirs. Scatrian. Even though Vigil is mostly safe for its many farmers and homesteaders, there are still areas where the Gwicht's influence is strong. In these places, the ridings are generally claimed by soldiers and warriors who can be trusted to fight the evil creatures that emerge, and strangely few of the old nobility hold these ridings. Scatrian is one such riding. The dense forest it is situated in is known to attract all manner of foul beasts. Its rider is a wildling named Fionn Faver O'Conlaigh. Fionn Faver was once a Galoglach, most recently amongst the Oakharts, and fought against the Gwicht's creatures many times in their career. Now a rider, he leads his militia against them to protect what is his, to bring glory to the Shaper. Despite his sizable militia, certainly in comparison to other ridings, Scatrian suffered greatly during the Season of Uncertainty, besieged and isolated for months at a time. Chelig. Chelig is a riding in the Greylands, on the border marches between Vigil and Usa, where the excellent farmland of Vigil begins to give way to the moors of Usa. Chelig shares a land border with Usa and maintains a strong militia to discourage any border strife. Chelig's rider is Gurvan the Bold, a Lasir artificer of some renown in Umra, where he spends most of his time as one of the Iarla's closest friends. The Iarla confided that they did not wish to even consider Gurvan a viable suspect. However, in recent times have become more and more vocal about the glory days of Vigil and how the realm needs to become more than it currently is. Irgrim. Located at the eastern edge of the Greylands, where the heath begins to slope towards the Shaper's Sea, Irgrim has always been regarded as out of the way and entirely too close to the borders of Usa for the sensibilities of most Ruby courtiers. Historically, the role of the rider of Irgrim is to maintain a buffer against creatures that emerge from the sea and incur inland. Today, it is seen as a riding granted to those that the Iarla wishes to reward, but also keep at arm's length. The current rider is Iora Nick Iana, a Lasir who once served as the Thane of the Galoglach band, the Reddened Blades. Iora and the Iarla have a relationship that goes all the way back to their childhood, though it is entirely negative. There were rumours that Iora had been seen at the head of a large armed force during the Season of Uncertainty, but the Iarla confided that they didn't want their own biases to influence the investigation of the band. May. The other riding within the Greylands is the region of May, which is known for its bounty harvests and for being home to many field wildlings. The most recent rider, Siofra Punan, was killed in the defence of Bar during the Season of Uncertainty, and her replacement has yet to be decreed by the Iarla. As the officers of Cuacht na Raig began to consider the evidence before them and make arrangements for the investigations in the days to come, the impact of the Hefewicht could not be ignored. During the course of the mission, both the Gologlik camp and the region around were oft assailed by senseless beasts. The influence of the Hefewicht drove the beasts away from their dens and hunting grounds and towards the inhabited regions of the Grey Lands. Across the first 2 days of the mission, such attacks grew in ferocity and frequency. However, beneath the light of the moon on the second day, Thane Ulgar Corcra led a small group of the band deep into the nearby forests and slew the Hefewicht, putting an end to its threat. Due to the diligence and capability of the members selected, no member of the band was lost amidst that dark night, though the wounds the Hefewicht dealt were fearsome, and it called many other dire beasts to its side before it could be slain. As the mission continued, the members of Cuacht na Raig began to assemble evidence and clues that revealed the presence of a conspiracy amongst the riders that the Iarla of Shifel had asked them to investigate. Some of the riders were disregarded, either truly loyal to the Iarla and the Raig, suffering from ill fortune, or lacking the competence to conduct a meaningful uprising. With these ruled out, there was sufficient evidence to confirm that a conspiracy existed between Dosach Ach Éinean, Gurvan the Bold, and Fiann Fover O'Conleach, together with the now deceased rider Siofra Punan of May. The diligent efforts of the reconnaissance officer, Rumaan MacUlton, and their assistants proved to be sufficiently comprehensive to assemble a timeframe of the treasonous acts of the conspirators. In a report to the members of Cuacht na Raig, Rumaan wrote, "Based on evidence gathered by the band from a variety of sources, primarily letters recovered from the various militias and bandits in the conspiracy's employ, we were able to establish a rough timeline of events. During the spring of 798, Dosach Ach Éinean wrote to Gurvan the Bold, complimenting him on building up his militia and suggesting they should meet to discuss working together and expanding that operation. Shortly after their meeting, Dosach recruited Siofra Punan to their conspiracy, and they decided to increase the size of their militias far beyond the restrictions put in place by the Iarla, utilising fake liveries to conceal their numbers and constantly moving the camps to avoid detection. During the summer of 798, Siofra recruited her cousin Fiann Fover to their cause, bringing his substantial militia and campaigning experience to the conspiracy. During this time, the conspiracy recruited a golden knife named Vale to command their main force of troops in the field, as well as a bandit leader named Concover to lead another detachment. They continued to move their illegal armies around the Grey Lands to avoid detection. By the winter of 798, the Season of Uncertainty had seen the defeat of the Blazing Host and Marie the Brute. But across the 5 realms, the situation was still chaotic. The regent ordered that all Gologlik separated from their bands were now members of the Golden Knives, and were to seek out their Thane. This allowed Gologlik to go where they felt they were needed, but also provided an opportunity for the conspiracy, which required replica golden knife pins to outfit their most elite troops, providing an even greater level of cover for their activities. The spring of 799 saw the foulest and most direct action from the conspiracy, at least until the heresy Dosach perpetuated with the false heroes. Seemingly acting alone, Dosach convinced members of Lavan's Legacy, a violent chivalric independence group, to murder several riders in Usa, including the adoptive family of the now rider Sheila I Dovgila. By the summer of 799, the conspiracy was starting to show signs of fracturing. Gurvan wrote to Dosach demanding he denounce Lavan's Legacy and ideally dispose of any he could identify. Siofra fell during the defence of Bar, and the same day one of Umra's towers was destroyed. This tragedy seemed to shatter Dosach's already fragile mind, and he decided that there was no longer any line he would not cross. During the autumn of 799, Fionn Fovere makes it clear to the other conspirators that without Siofra, he has little interest in the whole endeavour, and with only 3 riders involved, it is a lot harder to conceal the movement of their troops. He also expressed deep concerns over Dosach's activities and his ties to Lavon's legacy. By the summer of 800, the conspiracy is both on its last legs and at its most dangerous. Siofra is dead. Fionn Fovere has all but abandoned the cause. The appointment of the new Raig has begun to settle the 5 realms, and Irla Altna has once again returned her attentions to Shival. Unfortunately, instead of simply dissolving the conspiracy and focusing on the needs of Gelaspe, Dosach decides to escalate the situation. Facing the crumbling of the conspiracy, Dosach made attempts to kidnap or kill a number of other riders, which were ultimately frustrated by members of Cuath na Raig. In a final, desperate bid to prevent the ending of the conspiracy, Dosach conspired for his forces to conduct a ritual to call forth shades of the heroes of Lavon's legacy to attack Cuath na Raig. The focus for the ritual was a tome given to Dosach by a mysterious individual known as Tirneach. By the time that Cuath na Raig had become aware of this ritual, the unquiet spirits of several of the heroes had been called forth and moved to attack the camp of Cuath na Raig, together with the remnants of the conspiracy's soldiers. The spirits that had been called forth included mockeries of Cathbad, the Resplendent Thunder, Brona Darcha Devil of the Last Sight, Cahal Diarg and Barha Bouis, the Spear and the Shield, Conleach the Sword Eater, and Lyra Blackthorn, the Carer of All. A skilled ritualist amongst the band's members, Oltan Twinspears, was able to retrieve the tome and began a counter-ritual to return the spirits to their rest. Oltan Twinspears theorized that the stories of the heroes had been perverted to achieve this foul end, and described the ritual and what was required to combat it as follows. The crux of the ritual revolved around an artifact tome, which magically bound and twisted these stories through simple script, and enforced them with arcane means bound within the artifact. I was able to recognize the tome for what it was due to my extensive studies in the lore of magic and its theories. Any who have had similar studies would also be able to tell such items after but a moment of intense concentration on said item. The tome contained stories of individual heroes we faced by name. Each entry was 1 page long, and each entry addressed the hero by the commonly used name and title. Then the stories began to diverge from standard retellings. In a different script, both colour and style of writing, the stories were embellished. These embellishments caused the conjured spirits of the heroes of Shival to become corrupted and twisted to make them see us, rightful enforcers of the Raig's rule, as enemies of Shival. Some accounts noted that they even referred to members of our band as Gwicht. The tome specifically made us seem like outsiders, and naturally this caused the heroes to perceive us as their archetypal enemies and attack our band members, and ultimately our camp. While channeling the right, it was important to reinforce their true stories through arcane scripture. As the leading ritualist, I took it upon myself to correct the stories by rewriting the salient points about their fable in the artifact tome, and later proclaiming the corrected tales aloud, since stories need to be heard, retold, and remembered, as is their essence. It was important but not critical to draw on parallels between members of our band and the corrupted spirits of the heroes, and to root them in the contemporary. It was also important not to deprive them of their core features and meanings, such that they are no longer a story. This was achieved by involving people who could relate to these stories in the ritual, so that they could draw on their own experience and anchor the stories back in truth and legend where they belong. After the ritual retelling of the heroes' stories by individuals who resonated with them, the artifact tome burst into flames and was no more. Once the counter-ritual had been completed, the spirits were quietened and soon faded. With that, the band had achieved its twin aims of eliminating the Hefewicht and uprooting the conspirators against the Irla and the Raig. The remaining conspirators were delivered to the Irla to face justice, and the band received a bonus for their deeds across the days. Once the success of the mission had been communicated to the Irla, and the Thane had confirmed to the band that the mission was complete, the members of Cuath na Raig once more separated for the winter months. It is a mark of their great skill and heroism that they suffered no lasting harm while combating the twin threats to Vigil and to the wider Five Realms. As the band dispersed, its members turned to their other occupations. Some offered their services in guarding nearby settlements, while others mediated disputes in the same regions. Even more took the downtime to craft more magical items, for sale or for the benefit of the band, while a few intrepid individuals scouted further afield or conducted research into mysteries they had been presented with. However, as spring began to draw to an end, one and all received the message that they had expected, a call from their Thane to gather once more to deal with a new threat to the peace and safety of the Five Realms. Cuailnge na Rég had been called to Bruid to deal with a new monster terrorizing the lands known as the Smiling Gwicht. It is said that the creature's foul appetite leaves behind no trace of its victims. The realm of Bruid is known for its many dangers, and yet the Smiling Gwicht has managed to surpass all others. The people of Bruid are afraid to venture beyond the walls of their settlements, and contact has been entirely lost with remote villages.